a review of the estimates of revenue and expenditure, adopt it, proceed to consider an appropriation bill, pass it for this august body to begin the process of taking charge of how this country is managed. The National Assembly should not pretend to be innocent. You cannot have the knife and the bread and claim that you don't know where to cut, or blame somebody else for not cutting where you should cut. The starting point is to understand the functions of this very assembly. Honorable Speaker, what we are doing here today anchors the very basis for struggling to attain our right to self-determination and independence. Fundamentally, we struggled to ensure that taxation was linked with representation, and that representation was linked to the provision of services to our people. That's why we're here. That is why Section 26 of the Constitution gives us the right to representation. Every citizen of the Gambia of full age and capacity shall have the right without unreasonable restriction to take part in the conduct of public affairs, directly or through freely chosen representatives, to vote and stand for election at genuine periodic elections for public office, which election shall be by universal and equal suffrage and be held by secret ballot, to have access on general terms of equality to public service in the Gambia. We are given the responsibility that in our soldiers, Honorable Speaker, we are asked to take charge of how this country manages its affairs. The starting point is Section 149 of the Constitution. It asserts no taxation shall be imposed except by or under the authority of an act of the National Assembly. The executive cannot impose any taxation on the Gambian people without that authority being derived from this very assembly. Honorable Speaker, it goes further to assert that even if you are to give tax waiver, it's not the authority of the executive. Subsection 3 said, where any law confers power on any person or authority to waive or vary a tax imposed by any law, the exercise of that power in favor of any person or authority shall be subject to the approval of the National Assembly. We must know our functions and our powers and stop the blame game. If we are ready to carry out our powers, let's do it. If we are not, let's surrender. Honorable Speaker, Section 150 asserts that there shall be a consolidated fund into which shall be paid all revenues or other monies raised or received for the purposes of or on behalf of the government, and any other money raised or received in trust for or on behalf of the government. So it goes, Honorable Speaker, that The law further asserts that no money shall be withdrawn from the consolidated fund except to meet expenditure charged on that fund by this Constitution or an act of the National Assembly. It comes back to us. Where the issue of that money has been authorized by an Appropriation Act, a Supplementary Appropriation Act, in accordance with subsection 1 of this Constitution, it adds, no money shall be withdrawn from any other public fund of the Gambia unless the issue of that money has been authorized by law. So everything owned by this land is supposed to be put into a consolidated fund. Nobody can remove that money from that fund unless they come here. That is the reality. That's why we're here. That's why Section 152 asserts what, Honorable Speaker, you've already considered in this National Assembly, that the President will cause for estimates to be brought before us for consideration. There is no need to quote what has been quoted over and over again unremittingly. And the estimates of revenue and expenditure has been brought here, Honorable Speaker. What I would want to emphasize is the need for us to start to scrutinize not only expenditures but also the revenue side. Because it is the revenue that enables.
You have to speak a little bit loud so that. Well, you're a little bit far from your microphone.
Maybe, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we have to begin to look at the revenue side and scrutinize it, because that is what will enable us to meet expenditures. And that will require more consideration. Honorable Speaker, if we look at the introduction, at page 5, what is the minister to do today after the estimates of revenue and expenditure had already been adopted? That is to lay before us the appropriation bill. And it is emphasized that in laying the bill, the minister may also deal with the monetary and fiscal program of the government. He may also deal with the economic, social plans and development of the government, and even provide estimates of revenue and expenditure for meeting those programs over the years, not only for this year under review. And that's what the budget speech is all about. Concretely then, we have the appropriation bill before us, and we need to examine its essence and see whether we should actually pass it. Honorable Speaker, it is important to give the basis of revenue generation, which ultimately provides us with the basis to spend. Section 21 of the Public Finance Act tells us very clearly what revenue means. It says under subsection 2 that government revenue and other receipts include tax revenues, including taxes on income and profits, domestic taxes on goods and services, taxes on international trade, and transactions and other taxes. To speed up the process, the minister has given us some of the areas that government intend to tap resources by increasing fees of services provided by government by increasing commercial rent income from 10 to 15, and it goes on and on. Honorable Speaker, at the level of approving the estimates, we needed to get into the details of the sources of revenue, examine them before approving the estimates. Look at the implications. Look at whether this taxation is going to be progressive or retrogressive. Is it going to burden the taxpayer or reduce the burden of the taxpayer? The objective of paying tax is not to burden the taxpayer, but to provide the services that will enable the taxpayer to live a better life. We must enable the people to understand why taxes are paid, what taxes, how. I looked at the Income and Value Added Tax Act 2012 to look at the issue of commercial rents. Well, Honorable Minister, Honorable Speaker, I've seen residential rent tax under Section 116, but I'm yet to see commercial rent tax. And I think a distinction needs to be made. If it is not there, maybe that should be injected by way of an amendment of this act, so that we distinguish residence and commercial. Because if we fail to do that, any increase in residential tax, rent tax, is going to increase on what people will be paying to those who own those compounds. All those who are renting will be burdened. What is the use of increasing salary? Only to also increase the burden of the person who has received that salary. That's not logical. It does not make sense. And once they hear that salaries have increased, all the compound owners will increase their rent. And if they also hear that it's going to increase by 15%, what do you expect? It will increase. So therefore, tax must be rational. And this National Assembly should begin to review what it is proposed, dissect it, and know what we should accept and what we should not accept. Honorable Speaker, it is important to reflect on the other items. It says further that in the revenue side, it includes non-tax revenue, including profits from public enterprises, administrative fees and charges, fines and forfeitures, repayment of loans and other non-tax revenue, including proceeds from sales of public assets. What do we have as information telling us what the public enterprises are contributing to the government budget, to the revenue side? In the past, way in the past, when budget speeches are presented, summaries will be given of the financial positions of all the public enterprises, the taxes paid by them, dividend paid by them or otherwise, at least to give us an indication whether the public enterprises are fit for purpose or not. Ultimately, it was abandoned in those republics to start on the right footing. A year has passed and ensure that what happens in the past will not continue to happen again. So there it is important, Honorable Speaker, for the Minister to take that into consideration, that this Assembly should not want, I cannot dictate that, but this Assembly should not want to see any budget speech again which does not tell us the state of affairs of those public enterprises and their contribution to the national revenue. Honorable Speaker, on the revenue side, there should be domestic and external grants. All the revenues paid to the government in accordance with any law, including departmental, self-raised revenue, and domestic and external borrowing to finance the budget deficit. So it is very clear that when the Honorable Minister comes to us and then tells us the situation of the fiscal outlook of the government at page 32, he is simply abiding by the dictates of the law. And what he told us is that total revenue and grants in 2019 will be 25.3 billion as compared to 19.8 billion in 2018. He tells us what the domestic revenue would be, what they could mobilize domestically. And he says that what they can mobilize domestically is 11.8 billion as compared to 9.6 billion in 2018. So we have an estimate of 25.3 billion, but domestically we can only raise 11.8 billion. So in that respect, we're talking about what amounts to 13.3 billion, which 13.5 billion, if my calculation, mathematicians should help me, but 13.
It's not here, at least the mathematician.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, it's over 13.5. I'll say 13.5. The Minister will correct me if my calculation is wrong. Billion, which have to be sought from elsewhere. It must come as budget support. As compared to 9.6 billion being gained domestically out of a budget of 19.8 for 2018, requiring 10.2 billion to be gained as budget support. Last year we could not sustain our budget. This year also we cannot sustain our budget. And not only that, it is increasing from 10.2 to 13.5 billion. So in that regard, Honorable Speaker, we must see the need for the intervention of this National Assembly in looking at the situation. And if we are to take charge, and we are in charge, the Honorable Speaker must implement Section 52 of the Public Finance Act. We must ensure, Honorable Speaker, Section 52 is saying that the ministry shall each year prepare a draft annual report on state debt management operations, guarantees, and lending activities, and other financial arrangements entered into over the previous financial year. The report shall include information on the debt management strategy and rationale, information on the contribution of the debt management strategy and debt management operations in achieving the debt management objectives as stated in the law. A list of all outstanding state debts. That's my emphasis, Honorable Speaker. The list of all outstanding state debts. And what subsection says, the minister shall review the draft report and after notifying the cabinet shall submit it to the National Assembly not later than the end March. So every year before the end March, such a report should be before this National Assembly so that we know the true state of the debts of the country. Then this supplementary appropriation that was brought before us would not have been strange, because we would have known what the reality was before it came before us. But Honorable Speaker, just look at the history. First Republic, Second Republic, and it is continuous. Anytime you see miscellaneous, page 64 of the 2018, you will see what is called settlement of confirmed debts. Settlement of confirmed debts. Settlement of confirmed debts. In 2017, about 196. I hope they will change, Honorable Speaker. These small, tiny things is not good for all of us. It's not friendly for all of us. 196 million. In 2018 is 203, over 200 million. Let me put it that way. And if we come to what we reviewed here also, for the 2019 settlement of confirmed debts, it is now anticipated to be 440 million for 2019. When will we confirm all the debts? So when we started the new dispensation, what should have happened, Honorable Speaker, is for government to carry out the task that is dictated by Section 52, make sure that all those government is indebted to would actually submit their claims, and it will be reviewed. And in 1 year, to confirm all the debts and bring it before this August body for a review. One may have inherited something, but it's a contract. A newly coming government cannot refuse to honor contracts legally contracted by a government that it has replaced. That should have been the starting point. Then we'll clear all the debts or progressively put them in the budget for it to be cleared, and then start afresh. Honorable Speaker, I am saying, if we do not want to repeat the mistakes of the past, that is precisely what the minister should do. Honorable Speaker, it is therefore important to understand that we are dealing with a critical element, and when it comes to the revenue side, the increase in the fees that the minister has said has not been increased since 1977 does not go in line with the desire to reduce the burden on the Gambian people. We need to look at all the issues that increase burden, but knowing fully well that sometimes the problem is not increasing taxation. Sometimes it's making collection more efficient. Sometimes the issue is increasing compliance. Sometimes it is helping people to become more honest. Sometimes people will evade because of fear of reprisals. So when a new government comes into being, it sets a date. By March All should comply to do this. If you fail to do so, we'll apply the law. So you will see that all the businesses, everybody will struggle to comply because you know that you have done wrong in the past when it was easy to do so. But now that it is not possible to do wrong anymore, then you will comply. It is important, as I had said from the very beginning, that we start with tax reform. And tax reform comes with tax review. And with a review exercise, we will know exactly what form of tax policy we should put in place in order to guide our fiscal policy and to build our revenue base. I would propose that the minister move in that direction, that repressive tax laws will never yield a result. What it does is people will escape and move to other jurisdictions. So what is important is to get them involved, to know that without them the country will fail, without them the country will collapse, so they are partners in this process. So they should exercise that candor to serve, to do what they are supposed to do under the law so that the country will be served. The other aspect, Honorable Speaker, of what we were supposed to do here, and my emphasis here, Honorable Speaker, and I will soon close because I know that I should not really monopolize the flow. Essentially, I am emphasizing, therefore, that in the next opportunity we have, we should be given more time. And the minister, in introducing the estimates, should really, all these things we are now told of commercial rent, etc., that should come to us at the level when we are considering the estimates. So that we look at the revenue side, the fees that are to be paid. It is there, but we take time to look at it. Send them to committees if need be. For example, the Public Enterprise Committee for Public Enterprises. We look at them, and then we sit with the minister and help the draft, so that at the end of the day, we know that what is being proposed is concrete, is fair, and can yield the results that we desire, can give the outcome, so we know that definitely we have looked at all the sources where the government can derive domestic revenue, and that we are now putting it to be implemented. I believe that approach will help us to move a step further. Now, on the expenditure side, subsection three also shows us what the expenditure should be. It emphasizes that current expenditures, including salaries and wages, allowances, pensions and gratuities, expenditure on goods and services, current transfers, and interest payments, capital expenditures, including acquisition of capital assets and capital transfers, lending and equity preparation, payment of principal on domestic and external borrowing. So essentially, when we look at the expenditure side, we should see all these elements that needs to be covered. So in short, Honorable Speaker, looking at the speech given to us to introduce the appropriation bill, we can see that in terms of fiscal policy, government is talking about prudence, is ensuring that we reduce domestic borrowing. And the hope is that in reducing domestic borrowing, we will free the government from depending on the 12 banks that we have, with 85 branches, as the minister has said. And therefore, the treasury bills will be reduced, and he said it has been reduced by 53%. That the idea there is that what they used to claim that the private sector is crowded out, that now the banking system will have all the liquidity necessary to be able to give loans to the private sector for private sector development. And my calculation, and I will not go into it and doing the quotation because I know that my time is so much taken, the minister is saying that at least 2 billion, if I subtract last year and this year, the anticipated 2019, at least 2 billion in 2018 has been put into the private sector as investment. That's $2 billion. If we look at really what that can do and which sectors had been developed, which is the key thing, because the objective of private sector development is to be able to generate employment and expand the GDP of the country. But essentially, we do not have real tracing of where that money went, how much employment it has generated. If you look at Section 44 of the Labor Act, it is saying that the Labor Department should establish a unit to be able to register all those people who are seeking jobs, so that you can twin them with those who want to provide jobs. So that should be established, so that those private sector operators who are actually creating those jobs will tell the Labor Department. It will be registered. The minister will come and tell us, yes, this year, then this number of private operators had registered there. They have generated this type of employment. That is really what will not lead us just to a mystified situation of just simply having statistics where you cannot see concretely the manifestation of the statistics. So I would again propose, Honorable Speaker, that be implemented. Section 44 of the Labor Act be implemented, so that we stop blaming the youths that they are not trained. People from outside, if there is a ceremony, all of them will go to their country and there will be no fish. Is it that because, and I will come closer to my conclusion, we talk about the Songhai project. I went to Benin. I saw the person who established that project. For 40 years, he's been in Benin. Everything well established. Agriculture, horticulture, fisheries, all combined, electricity generation, processing. But for 40 years he's there, and the Beninois youths were saying, we do not have employment. How has that project been replicated to be a national entity that will free the young people from poverty? Yes, the innovator is there, but the governments that should take that innovation to translate it into national policy is not there. So we must move away from just experiments. We must see how those experiments fit into policy. And Honorable Speaker, everywhere on the African continent, they are telling the youth, train, skill training. And they give them the impression that through those skill training, they are going to be self-employed. Everywhere, government cannot do everything. People must be self-employed. They are deceiving the young people, because we know in economics that a person can never be self-employed unless he owns the means of production. How can you be self-employed without owning the means of production? You train them and you don't give them the means of production. How will they be employed? How will they be self-employed? They do not have land. They do not have machine. They do not have all the other wherewithals. How will they be self-employed? So, Honorable Speaker, we must begin to be realistic. We must see that an economy where 23% in agriculture, aiming to produce from 69,000 tons of rice to 122,000 tons by the end of the planned period, national development period. It has been declared before that by 2016, we will be self-sufficient in rice production. We were importing 200,000 tons of rice and only could produce 57,000 by 2015. That was the promise. The promise failed. What is the new promise? And how will it be implemented? Concretely, who will be the producers? What do we put at their disposal to be able to produce? I would have thought that even in this budget speech, we will know the state of groundnut production. the marketing, the reality. We only know that the world market price is increasing. But what is the concrete reality? We need to know. And we must also bear in mind that talking about giving few people the land so that they can engage in highly mechanized agriculture is not going to eradicate poverty. You must transform our family farms into cooperatives, give them all the wherewithal they need, and they will increase production and the wealth will go back to them. Many investors are ready to take over our land and give it to a few in the name of mechanized or commercial agriculture. Where will our people get the employment? You turn them into just merely indentured servants, earning pittance. Is that why we talk about liberation and changing a country and independence and development? Let's argue on policy. We can have a national development plan, but let's argue on policy. What should we do to eradicate the poverty of our people? That is very important, Honorable Speaker. And I must conclude now. An adjournment debate, I'll be able to touch into other things and probably write about other things so that we can all learn from each other. There are so many things to be said. But Honorable Speaker, we are claiming that the budget is not pro-poor. But is this National Assembly pro-poor? We all knew when we came here that $15,000 a month with a new transport given or new or whatever transport given to people, and when they had this transport, what will fuel the transport? If you spend $500 a day, your $15,000 salary has gone. And the National Assembly members knew the pinch. That's why they insisted that it is important to increase the house to office so that they'll be able to fuel transport. Let's be real. All other ones came. We continue to say that the vast majority of people are not earning. We need to increase salaries. When a budget comes before us and we see the pittance, and they talk about increasing the salaries across the board by 50%, what should have been our role is to refuse our salaries to be increased and indicate that that should be added. Let us at least freeze our income as to what it is, and we manage with that. Whatever comes again, let us go to the people that we represent. That is how we should have shown that this National Assembly is pro-poor. One has no moral authority to criticize anybody unless you look at yourself and then do the very opposite that that person is doing. We know in our language, if you fail to do that, what it means. So my conclusion, Honorable Speaker, is that this National Assembly now has, someone has said this is the litmus test. If we accept this increase, the suffering will increase. And they will start quoting what you are receiving. For me, this is my last sojourn in this National Assembly. I will never be a National Assembly member again after this term. I'm not interested in being a national. I just want to at least leave a legacy of how a National Assembly should function. But some of you want to be here again. I'm emphasizing that the way we are going to show that this National Assembly is pro-poor is to understand, yes, you have to live to serve because you are representing them. But let us understand a limit. Let's put a limit. and then move from there to help others to also advance. Thank you very much.